One sector that contributes to the competitive value of a nation is the creative industry. Nigeria is one nation that has witnessed in the past decade transformations in the creative industry, which covers the music, film, fashion, arts, literature, and writing. One organization that has contributed to the growth and development of this industry in Nigeria is the British Council. To give further insight on the British Council activities and even the planned mapping of the creative industry is Assistant Director of British Council, Ojoma Ochei.
We're the UK's cultural organization, which just means that we develop cultural projects in quotes to link people of the UK with people around the world. And we work in three main sectors: in English, in education and society, and in arts. Now, coming down to arts, in line with our mandate, what we're meant to be doing is building relationships between people, in this case in Nigeria, and people in the UK through the arts. But increasingly, the arts have become a source of economic benefit to nations around the world, particularly the UK. And so over the years, we found that from our historically traditional way of engagement through the arts, which was showcasing, you bring a performance to the UK, to Nigeria, take a performance from here, there, we had to move to something, to incorporate something that was more in keeping with the times. And that's where the creative industries come in. Because on one hand, you have the arts sector, which for us, it's more about showcasing artistic exchange and collaboration. And then on the other hand, you have the creative industries, which is more about enterprise in the arts. And so in thinking about that, we were looking at areas that would be of mutual benefit to both Nigeria and the UK. You may know that the creative industries in the UK are a very significant part of the UK economy, from publishing to gaming and software, to film, to music, to fashion. Those are significant contributors to the UK economy. And then coming back to Nigeria, I don't need to tell you there's Nollywood, there's a Nigerian music industry. So obviously that's an area that there would be mutual interest for collaboration and building relationships with the UK. And so because our mandate is to build those kinds of mutually beneficial relationships, we decided to work quite strongly in the creative industries.
Well, that's really interesting from the UK aspect, nurturing and building this industry. Now, we see a global unemployment trend, we see a lot of young people jobless. But tell us how critical the creative industry is to an economy.
Absolutely critical. An interesting thing about the creative industries are that they're a labor-intensive sector. So you want to make one film, and there's a range of skills that you need to make the one film. From the photography to the makeup, to the sound, to the location for one film. Yeah. So it is quite labor intensive. And so around the world, the creative industries have become a significant employer of labor, particularly of young people, because with technology rapidly changing, it means that young people who are always on the cusp of new technology are able to keep up with, trends and changes in the sector. And so from that job creation perspective, it's absolutely critical. The creative industries employs 2 million people, I think it is, in the UK. It employs, I think, 8.5% of the population in Canada. So there's data to show that, is a significant job earner. Apart from job creation, it's also a foreign exchange earner. So for example, in the UK, we know that for every £10 that the UK makes as export revenue, £1 is from the creative industries. And so that's a tenth of export revenue that comes to the UK from the creative industries. So from that perspective of foreign exchange, it's also very important to the economy. But also locally, we know that, again, back to the UK, we know that the creative industries generate £70,000 every minute for the UK economy. So you can see that from that end as well, the creative industries are very important. But obviously for this to happen, there are various other things that need to be put in place to be able to achieve these indices that I've mentioned.
The British Council has been every year, like we've known, supporting the arts, the cultural development, like you said. And you're now coming out with the mapping of the creative industry. I think you've had 2 or 3 summits, expo summits of the creative industry. 2. And you're moving a step forward now to map the creative industry in Nigeria. What is the intent of this organization?
You know, I mentioned before about all the contributions of the creative industries to the UK economy. A lot of that development is credited to the first mapping of the UK creative industries in 2001, thereabouts. And what happened at the time was the secretary for the DCMS, which is, I suppose, our Ministry of Culture, was new in office, and he decided to investigate. You know, there has always been filmmaking, there has always been publishing, there has always been fashion. But before that time, there hadn't really been any significant attempt to group them as industries that had similarities based on the fact that they're all based on intellectual property. When you think about it, publishing, film, fashion, it's all about ideas and skill and talent and applying intellectual property to them. So what happened at the time was he set up this group to do a mapping. Part of what the mapping did was to provide a definition for the creative industries in the UK, and for the UK to articulate for itself what its own creative industries were, and then to determine what the various sectors within the creative industries were contributing to the UK economy. Because before that time, even though there was recognition that that activity was happening, there hadn't really been a coherent strategy to support them or build them, and there hadn't really been a recognition of what they were contributing to the economy and to life in the UK at the time. So there was the mapping, and it was quite interesting, the results that came out of the mapping, because suddenly everybody was realizing, wow, it employs this many people, it contributes this much to the economy. So the argument to government and investors suddenly became much simpler to articulate, because you could go to a policymaker and say, look, the sector is employing 1 million people, and these are the barriers to growth that the sector is facing at the moment. And if you did this, this, and this, it could do so much more. And at the moment in Nigeria, we don't have that. So you have people saying things like, oh, Nigeria is the 2nd largest film producing nation in the world. But what does that actually mean in terms of how much of the money that we're making from film is coming from production? How much of it is coming from distribution? How much of it is coming from exhibition? You know, we don't have that breakdown. We don't have verifiable data on what's happening. And that's for film. For fashion, you know, there's nothing. We all say, oh, the fashion industry is growing, but growing from what to what? You know, same thing with music. We know that there's Nigerian music all over the world, across Africa and beyond. But what does that actually mean in terms of hard numbers? So that's what we're trying to do with the mapping, to try and establish about 4 or 5 basic things, really. Employment, how many people do these various sectors employ? The economics of it, the size, how much are they making, and what are they making it in? So are they making it in production? Are they making it locally, or are they making it internationally? So there's the economic size. And then we also want to know what the obstacles are to individual businesses in the sector. Because unless we know the obstacles, it's difficult to say these are the solutions, specific targeted solutions. And then we want to know from the business's own perspective, what do you need to make your business grow? And so with that argument and having that full picture, so what we're doing is like a snapshot of the creative industries. You can go to government or you can go to investors and say, look, the fashion industry in Nigeria is worth this much, and this is why you should invest in it. Or you can go to government and say, the fashion industries, this is what's happening, this is what it's worth, but they're having challenges with production because of XYZ. And it's based on fact, not any emotion or anecdotes or stories that are just flying around. So that's the reason why we're doing it.
That's really interesting, because when you do thorough surveys, mapping, you now have a strong case, like you said.
Absolutely.
To woo investors and also get collaboration from the government.
Absolutely.
But, are you getting the support at the moment necessary from government and various agencies? And what is the impact what will be the impact of this mapping on the Nigerian creative industry?
In terms of support, the thing with the creative industries is until you can make the argument, it's hard for anybody to take you seriously. And that has happened all over the world. It's not peculiar to Nigeria. And so because we're committed to working in this sector, we've engaged with various stakeholders, but we recognize that until the data is available and you can make the argument, it's hard for anybody outside the sector to see what you're talking about. And so we recognize that. So we're working with a few partners, but we could have done with a lot more support. However, it's not unusual to have this little support at the beginning of a mapping. We're working with a consortium who are providing expert advice. We're working with Pan-Atlantic University, School of Media and Communications. We're working with the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, and we're working with the Society of Nigerian Theatre Artists. And then in terms of what the impact will be, the thing with the mapping is, on its own, there's little it can do. It's about what you do with the results. So the first thing we want for the results to do is for the sector to be more confident. One thing we want to do with that is to build confidence in the sector, because it's much easier, I suppose, for, say, a fashion designer, if you know you're working in a $10 billion industry, there's some sort of confidence that it builds within you as a person that's working in that sector. So that's one of the first things we wanted to do. The second thing is still around the profile, but it's external profile. We want people who know nothing about the sector to know that actually, that somebody is a fashion designer doesn't mean that they're school dropouts or whatever. They're actually part of, say, a $10 billion industry, let's say. So we wanted to build the profile of the sector as well. And then back to the things I was saying before, we wanted to influence policy, because when you have clear data about where the obstacles are, where the barriers to growth are, where the opportunities are, then it's easy for policymakers to make evidence-based policy. So that if someone is saying, I'm giving X to the Nigerian fashion industry, you know what you're giving it for. It's easy for you to determine before you give the intervention that this is where the problems are, and so I will target my money to where it will make the most impact. That's for government. But that's even beyond giving money. If, say, the results show that production, let's say music, is a big issue, then it allows government to make policies that either aid production or that help the businesses that produce music to do it in a way that's more cost effective, therefore more profitable, therefore allows them to create more jobs, that sort of thing. And then I suppose the final thing is, and I'm summarizing here, by the way, the final thing is around investment. When you're speaking to someone who wants to put money in your business, it's easier for him to make the investment decision if he can see trends within your industry. So at the moment, it's very difficult for creative businesses to do that. They can largely, I suppose, articulate what the cash flow is or what the deal flow is within their business, but they can't do that for their sector in general. And with significant investment, that's never enough, just your business. People need to know who are your competitors, what's happening in the rest of the sector, how big is your sector. So the other thing I suppose it would do is stimulate investment. So in a nutshell, I think those are the things that we're looking to achieve from the mapping.
Thank you very much, Ojomache. This will definitely change the landscape of the creative industry.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for the time.
Thanks.